And I don't know of any other legislative member who has been disciplined in any effective manner in all the years I've been assistant city attorney or city attorney.
Well,
Now, you've been here for 90 days, I've been here for how many years?
Well, and I've been watching this council for a long time. If you want to get personal regarding labor negotiations, I can say that you've been wrong on more than one occasion too. So whether or not
let's keep it to the subject. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd like to thank my colleagues for bringing this forward, as evident by the dialogue that's taking place behind the rail. It's definitely something that needs to be addressed. In my estimation, it really comes down to ethics. You know, we have a ethical responsibility to our constituents that we are going to govern in a responsible way. And when it comes to this particular area, there seems to be a lot of gray. If I'm not mistaken, Council Member Bonnie Lowenthal had some kind of task team that was involved in some ethics training in 2006 or somewhere thereabouts. And I just think that this is an issue that we need some clarity on, and we need to clear up as quickly as possible so that our constituents can have some form of belief that, you know, this body is not nilly-willy and we're just doing things by the seat of our pants. So I thank you for bringing this forward. I think the conversation, although heated, has been needed, and it's an area that we need to address.
Councilmember Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Neal raised a very relevant issue with regard to the ethics task force. I think that was the ethics task force prior to 2006, and several members of our local community, including Fayette Downing, served on that. Either Mr. Shannon or the city clerk, do you recall what the disposition was of their recommendations? I believe the council did not adopt them at the time. This was prior to most of us being here, if not all of us.
I'm trying to recall. The city council voted down much of what Ms. Lowenthal was suggesting, but you did pass a standard of conduct. And incidental to that, the city attorney's office detailed a rather extensive ethics manual, which we have taken great trouble to introduce each new city council member to. And I personally have made it a point to make it very clear that we're prepared, that is, the city attorney is prepared to take all the time it takes with regard to each member of the city council to advise them as to what we believe to be the parameters of the Brown Act and other ethical requirements, not just the Brown Act, but numerous other ethical requirements, including those that relate to the FPPC.
And I want to thank you for that, Mr. Shannon. I know that the ethics book or booklet from the city attorney's office is one of the direct results from that task force. I don't recall the items that were not approved.
I believe the primary one that was voted down, and I'm relying on my recollection, was the creation of an ethics commission. Yeah.
Similar to what the city of Los Angeles has.
That's correct.
And so that's an interesting time frame, and really their recommendations. I do think we follow most of their recommendations. There were some that costs were an issue, costs to the city clerk's office, but certainly that would be worthwhile in reviewing. And I want to take us back to what I framed this issue with, which is it's not personal to any one member's past conduct, presumed conduct. I really do believe, based on our discussion from our deliberation from a couple of weeks ago, or perhaps it was even last week, that what was resounding for me is the fact that this is something that we don't have consequences for. And so what is the discouragement other than your personal compass, which we should all detrimentally rely on, but unfortunately I think that's what codes of conduct are there for, is so that they can guide practices that would otherwise seem like common sense. or common courtesy. And truthfully, it's also a confidence to the public that we take those issues very seriously as well. I think as a new council member, we're all required to do the AB 1234 training, which is the ethics training, and then the annual renewal. There's no harm in having our own training. I know at the Metropolitan Water District, they offer that during a board meeting so that every board member has that, because that requirement is there as well. So too much training is certainly not a problem, but if I can just distill out everything else that may appear personal, that's where I'd like to be with this policy item. I do think it's a good policy for us as an institution. We are a legislative body. We do have individual opinions and we differ greatly at times, but really at the end of the day, we want the same things for our constituents, and that begins with being able to work with one another with confidence. Thank you.
Mr. DeLong.
So, Mr. Shannon, you and I have had this conversation over the years about what constitutes a Brown Act violation of flexibility, but let me ask you a couple of specific questions. Now, I know when Councilmember O'Donnell had sent that information out after the closed session. Now, my understanding is there was no Brown Act violation there. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how do you feel about the subsequent follow-up by Councilwoman
Well,
Shipman?
you know, I really don't feel comfortable getting into the specific. It's not on the agenda, and I'm not here to criticize the particular actions of individual council members unless I'm forced to. So I'm going to decline. I'm going to decline to
Would
answer
those fall
that
into the
question.
category of acceptable, or?
I think that whenever any city council person crosses the line with regard to revealing information out of a closed session, I will pick up the phone and personally talk to them confidentially. Beyond that, I would resist making a public point of it.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I would just say, given what we've heard from our city attorney tonight, I'm more interested in, having a study session to discuss the Brown Act. I think we've seen some confusion up here, and even though we've had a lot of training, let's have a conversation in the future and make sure we all understand the ground rules.
Are you finished? I'm sorry. Councilmember Shipman.
Well, that's why I asked if we could amend the motion to include that the city attorney come back at some time certain when he's in a cheerier mood to provide a session on just an update about the Brown Act and its various pieces.
Is the cheerier mood part of the motion?
Well, it's not mandatory.
Maybe a long time.
Can't do a time certain.
We may have to agree with it, but it's a mechanism.
Councilmember Lowenthal, are you okay with that? Can I make an observation?
I'd like to
Not at the same time, he doesn't have to do it.
I'd like to make that optional clearly, because we do have our booklets, we have our certificated training requirements that are done, I believe, biannually. And Mr. Shannon, I'm not looking to create more work for you, but I think every member has different needs. I've been here 6 years. I have to do it, well, I don't have to do it twice, but certainly there's a metropolitan requirement to meet those needs as well. So I'd like to make that optional.
Okay,
Well,
Councilmember Shipman.
if I can, then I'd make a substitute amendment that we request that. I think it'd be helpful for the public to hear a public discussion of what the Brown Act is. I too am on the
Okay.
California Medical Board, and I have to go through this repeatedly to the Kings-Bagley Open Meetings Act as well, so.
So you're making the same motion with the addition?
With the addition requirement, and if I can, Mr. Shannon, you might want to see that the city of Fillmore actually did censure. That's part of their discipline, censured a city council member.
No, let's be absolutely clear. When I said it was a wrong without an effective remedy, I hope I've made it clear at the outset that you have the right to censure a member of your body for doing something like improperly leaking a matter from a closed session. There's no question about that. The question is whether a censure is an effective remedy.
Well,
but you do have the right to censure.
Can I add what they added? They took away the travel budget for that person, and they precluded that person from coming to further closed hearings, so, which I
Well,
find of
good luck on that one. An elected officer is not allowed to attend a closed session.
I need a second on this motion.
Second.
Moving second. All right, thank you. Mr. O'Donnell, let's close this off.
Thank you. I just want to be clear, this all emanates from a Harbor Board of Commissioners meeting, which I, quite frankly, didn't think Thomas Fields broke the law. He was talking about something that wasn't on the agenda. Hold on, let me finish. And was personal. wasn't a deal point. So, I hear a lot of talk about the council, but what we're also talking about here is probably boards and commissions, et cetera. So, and probably staff even. Contemplate that, Mr. Shannon, as we move forward.
Well, the rules with regard to what can and cannot be revealed are the same for commissioners as if they are for a legislative body. The point that I was trying to make is that the remedy with regard to a transgression by a legislative officer is much more limited than it might be for a transgression by and I'm not talking about the Harbor Commission, I'm talking about any commission, I'm talking about any commission that meets in closed session. There are very effective remedies with regard to that impropriety, if it's significant enough in the opinion of the appointing authority, which case, in this case it's the mayor, they can be removed.
Well, when you're talking about training and such, I guess my point is it should trickle down through the organization or up, however you want to look at it.
Councilmember Lowenthal, you finished?
No, I'm not. So, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, what I wanted to, well, actually, Councilmember O'Donnell, the commissioners have the same training requirements that we do and the same ethics certification requirements that we do to all the appointed boards and commissions. And so it would be the same, and I agree with you, this would be across the board, and that's clearly the intent. On the issue specifically of requiring training with this motion, we already are required to do the biannual training. The issue is not whether some of us or all of us don't know what the Brown Act is. We loosely cite it almost weekly, but it seems convenient, and we loosely cite it because it is of convenience, because there are no remedies. This item's calling for the city attorney to come back with a proposal on what we can consider. I do not think the problem here is for us to subject ourselves to more training. And Councilmember Shipsky, you can opt for training yourself. Colleagues, I'd ask you to vote down the substitute and let's stick with the item. This is not, the issue here is not how much more training we need. We clearly know right from wrong. The problem is there are no remedies for that. And the item asks to solve that situation, not to add layers of training, which you already have. And Councilmember Austin, you went through it, and you can ask for more. We all, I think, on our anniversary date, we've gone through it. As a new member, you have to do AB 1234 training.
I'm gonna wait for my time.
Okay, so I don't believe that's appropriate at this time to ask for additional training, because that's not the problem right here. The problem is there's no consequence.
All right, the lines are clearly drawn. Let's try to bring this to a conclusion. Mr. Austin.
Yes, I'd just like to state that I wasn't asking for training, particularly for myself, for Brown Act violations. My point was that I don't believe that we have done enough in terms of doing so with our commissioners, even with our city council, and following up and informing people about the particulars of the Brown Act. I did my independent research. I did read the Brown Act. I've been involved in government for a long time. I understand the Brown Act, Ms. Lowenthal. But I do think there is value to training for not only the city council, formalized training, not only for the city council from the city, but also to our city commissioners. And that was the point that I tried to make. I think Councilmember Shipsky tried to capture that in her motion.
Mr. Garcia.
Could I just make a brief comment in regard? The city attorney's office provides ongoing training to all of the commissioners with regard to the Brown Act.
Mr. Garcia, let's try to end this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just needed to point out, I think, if someone was watching this discussion, you'd think this is some unethical and unruly body that we have here together. And I just want to make it very clear that I think this is a body that is actually highly ethical, generally does the right thing, follows the rules, and has, I think, all of us participated in the required training that is demanded of us as elected and public officials. What I think is important to note is that what's been said is true. I think, Mr. Shannon, I just want to say, I know you've been in a back and forth discussion, but I want to think you and I have a constant running discussion about the Brown Act and about what can and cannot happen, and I think you're always available to us as a body, and I think We appreciate that. But I just want to remind us as well that we've had not only the ethics certification, any sorts of violations. I think that's a good start for us, and so I like the original motion.
Sir Donald, then we're closing this off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just first I want to comment on Councilmember Garcia's comment, Vice Mayor Garcia's comments. I think you hit the target. Mr. Shannon's available 7 days a week. You can call him for any advice. I do quite often, and you're always there.
Well, not during the Sundays when the code.
Well, actually, sometimes.
But Arizona on Sunday.
Yeah, but either way, what I'd like to do is make a substitute motion to receive and file.
Second.
Okay, we have 3 motions. Any member of the public wish to address the council on this item? Try to make it brief.
I'll do my best to stick within the 3 minutes. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and staff. My name is Gary Shelton. I never know which way to point. I think it's that way now, 240 Chestnut Avenue, a block or so from here. I heard one brief mention from the 2nd District when she said, is there any discouragement that we suffer from this? And that might include the loss of the trust of the people. When you look at the Brown Act, it's really easy, from your point of view, to scoot down in the body of it. By the way, it's shorter than Robert's Rules of Order. It isn't very hard to read, and it isn't very hard to understand. But it's easy to scoot down several paragraphs to learn what can we go into closed session about, and how do we announce that closed session, and what do we do after the closed session. That's easy. What I want you to all do is go back at some point, find your section 54963 and read the preamble, or what would perhaps be section 1 of it, and I'm going to paraphrase this, where it says that what the Brown Act is for is because the people will not relinquish their need for conducting the people's business in public. That's what it's all about. Really about October 2nd or about the Harbor Commission, I don't know. I'm in favor of the original motion, which is to put some appropriate consequences behind violations of the Brown Act, because us folks out here and members of the public, we need to not lose our trust in you folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Just say, Mr. Sheldon, no one's talking about shielding anybody. This is about precisely that. It's about both things, providing consequences and perhaps doing more training. All right, we have a motion to receive and file. On the motion to receive and file, members cast your votes.
Motion fails, 2 votes yes.
Okay, we're going to go to the second substitute motion, which is the original motion with the addition of having additional training.
Mr. Mayor, can I, so we're in the second substitute, there's still an opportunity, may I make?
Councilmember Shipsky's.
Yes, may I make, or another member make a substitute motion?
Yeah, unfortunately, Mr. Shannon said we can.
Yes, we're back to that, and I'm glad we finally had a chance to look at it. I was correct, the Brown Act does permit.
No, it's Robert's Rules of Order.
Excuse me,
Get the
I'm sorry.
Brown Act.
I've got Brown Act on my brain. Robert's Rules does permit the making of another substitute motion so that you have 2 substitute motions on the floor. Now, as silly as that sounds, I think it behooves us to say, well, how do you stop this from happening ad infinitum?
You mean
And that
it's
is
got common sense,
simply
Mr. Shannon?
right. And the way you do that is to call for the question.
Well, I have my button.
I'm just saying, no, I'm just saying generally. I'm not suggesting that your motion is out of line. But somebody brought up
Yeah,
a few weeks
got it.
ago, why couldn't you just have substitute motions ad infinitum if you can always have 2 substitute motions on the
All
floor?
right, well,
And
you
the
can-
way you get around that
I
is to
got
call
it.
for the question.
Thank you. You can make your motion.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney and Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make the motion to adopt the recommendation for additional information with an optional training for council members.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All right, on. Clear the board. On the substitute as just described, members cast your votes.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Neal.
Going back to Councilmember Shipsky's motion, that wasn't just for council members, it was for commissioners,
And so.
council members,
It includes everybody.
Okay, council members,
Employees, board members.
I need a little
Mr. Mayor,
clarification.
can I clarify? It wasn't a training. It wasn't a mandatory training as it's been characterized. It was a session in council where there's a public discussion by the city attorney, and the public can also view it, what it is the Brown Act requires us to do. Not a mandatory training, you know, it wasn't, other than if you're going to impose a punishment, let's get clear by everybody what it is that the Brown Act requires. That's all.
Okay.
So we're all on the same
Mr.
page.
Neal?
Okay,
Mr. DeLong, that's it, we're done after this.
Yeah, I'm going to support the substitute. But just a clarification, Councilwoman Lowenthal, so this option will be available for anyone serving in that capacity, not just council.
All right, on to substitute members, cast your votes.
Thank you. Motion carries, 7 votes yes, 2 votes no.
No, mercifully, thank you. All right, thank you all, members, appreciate that. We're going to go to public comment. Martha Gibson. Martha Gibson. No, Mike Donlin.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Mike Donald. I live at 6245 Golden Sands in Long Beach. And this here is one of our young gun volunteers, Hector Torres. I'd like to bring him down here every now and then for little civics lessons and a little torture sometime. We always like to help these kids out, give them job opportunities. So if you're looking for a good intern on the same vein as the pet adoption, he speaks good Spanish, he cleans up really good, he's house trained and seldom needs a leash. But anyway, just real quick, for many years I've been involved in the community. I've, everybody's always tried to get at-risk youth to get involved in the arts and so forth. So I met with Michelle Dobson and John Glasso with the Arts Council Long Beach, and we came up with a quite unique idea that's going to occur this Saturday at Michael K. Green Skate Park. And what I've told the Arts Council and the arts people in the city of Long Beach is, instead of trying to get the kids to come downtown or to go to art events, is let's bring the art to the kids. So what we've done is we've put together this unique event where we will close down the street at the Michael K. Green Skate Park. It'll be an interactive art event. We have students that will be coming from Washington Middle School, Cabrillo, Renaissance, from the neighborhood. We'll have 10 live art panels with 10 artists doing live street art. And then we'll have art displays by the kids in the neighborhood and the school district and so forth. And a special treat for me working with autistic children is we'll have a special needs, an area for our special needs artists. So it's going to really be an interactive event. It's going to be great for the neighborhood. And our co-sponsors is always in that neighborhood is Vice Mayor Robert Garcia, and I appreciate all of his efforts in letting us do what we do in that neighborhood, but also the